Exactly $544 million has just been channeled by Canada directly into infrastructure initiatives across Latin America, at the precise moment Washington cut a $60 billion USAID package and imposed a 50% steel tariff, leaving its allies stunned. In those same 60 seconds, the power dynamics at the Alberta G7 summit turned upside down entirely. The next scene shocked the world. While the U.S. President's chair remained vacant in the center of the summit hall, the camera shifted to Prime Minister Mark Carney calmly finalizing a landmark defense agreement with South Korea. "We advocated for a memorandum of understanding to broaden our collaboration from clean energy technology to Canada's oil technology expertise, moving beyond the old framework of deep economic integration and close security ties with the United States," Carney stated. South Korea proposed a $20 billion-plus package, including submarines that could reshape Canada's naval defense approach. At the heart of this deal are German-designed KSS-3 submarines, engineered by Germany's Tyson Group Marine Systems, and refined by South Korean military specialists. This moment sparked a critical question: who truly leads the free world when America steps away from the stage? Over the next 24 hours, Canada and South Korea didn't merely fill a diplomatic gap, they wove together a security network spanning Asia, Europe, and Latin America, delivering a sharp counterblow that rattled the White House. Today's video breaks down every move Carney made to step into Trump's void, uncovers how Ottawa transformed a power vacuum into a springboard, and explains why Seoul is aligning with the maple leaf over Washington. Don't look away, because this century-altering shift is just beginning and could redefine the global economy within the next 30 days. On the G7 stage, Trump needed only 4 sentences in the Alberta meeting room to unleash a geopolitical earthquake. He announced a 50% tariff on steel and aluminum, threatening to extend the penalties to cars and heavy industry if allies didn't shoulder more defense costs. That stark figure immediately sent Canadian mining stocks plummeting nearly 4% in the afternoon trading session, while the European Chamber of Commerce in Seoul warned of a steep supply chain disruption, given South Korea's role as America's top steel exporter. With energy prices already soaring due to the Israel-Iran crisis, this tariff move was like pouring fuel on the global inflation fire. The drama escalated when Trump turned his chair and exited the hall on live television, leaving an empty seat in the center, the U.S. flag standing tall without its leader. Multiple reports noted it was the first time since the post-Cold War era that the G7 discussed the Ukraine and Gaza crises without an official U.S. voice. This moment reignited a pressing question: if the guardian of the old order walks away mid-discussion, who steps up to lead? Before leaving, Trump stirred further controversy by suggesting Russia, and possibly China, rejoin the G7 to correct 2014. European leaders quickly muted his microphone and changed topics. Yet the ripple effect was significant. Ukraine's foreign ministry condemned the proposal as rewarding aggression, while France and Germany worried their plan to cap Russian oil prices would collapse. Meanwhile, London futures saw wheat prices rise another 2.3% due to potential Black Sea grain corridor disruptions, an indirect cost of Moscow potentially rejoining the rich nations club. America's absence created an immediate diplomatic void. Hours later, as leaders rearranged seats, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney raised a statement that resonated: "Nostalgia is not a strategy." The words reverberated through the hall, signaling Ottawa's refusal to remain passive. Carney swiftly led an emergency session, proposing a $1.2 billion security package for Kyiv and advocating for a joint statement on a Gaza ceasefire. Both efforts stalled, largely due to the empty U.S. seat. Yet the boldest move came outside the summit. Canada and South Korea announced plans for an Arctic-Pacific Defense Accord, enabling Seoul to deploy anti-torpedo patrol craft in the Beaufort Sea while Ottawa opened strategic minerals to Korean battery giants. The agreement was unveiled just 47 minutes after Trump's plane departed, proving Carney didn't just mend a gap, he fortified the Western security framework. In that fleeting moment, Canada turned a White House outburst into an opportunity to redefine the role of a middle power kingmaker, while the U.S., knowingly or not, forfeited its leadership vote. Just a week earlier, Kitimat Port worked through the night to load the first shipment from the LNG Canada project, 14 million tons annually, onto a Korean-flagged vessel co-owned by Korea Gas. Reuters described it as a valve-opening shipment, unlocking over $6 billion in Arctic natural gas yearly for East Asia, just as Seoul seeks alternatives to Russian supplies. It seemed like a routine energy deal, but it was the prelude to an unprecedented security alliance across the Pacific. Following the ceremonial launch, Prime Minister Mark Carney met Acting President Lee Jun-ho in a makeshift war room in Alberta, repeating, "Nostalgia is not a strategy." According to the Korea Herald, the leaders signed a defense cooperation MOU, paving the way for Canada to acquire AES sensors, long-range surveillance radar, and unmanned control tech from LIG Nex 1. In return, Seoul will build a fleet of hybrid battery patrol ships based on the Harry de Wolf design, capable of navigating both the Bering Strait and the Yellow Sea. Carney's team emphasized that this transfer equips the Arctic sky with 24/7 electronic surveillance, while Seoul gains NATO branding on its vessels for the first time, a leap beyond Washington's influence. Budget figures show Canada's commitment. On June 9, the Carney government allocated an additional $9 billion for defense, focusing on seabed sensors and through-ice radar to monitor every movement beneath the permafrost. Notably, Ottawa chose a Korean prime contractor over an American one. Hanwha Aerospace showcased a full-scale integrated radar station and antifreeze fuel cell module at the CanSec 2025 Expo in Ottawa, capable of operating at -40°C without mainland cables. Canadian generals called it a supply chain game-changer, as core components, from GON chips to LFP battery cells, originate in Busan, not Milwaukee or Seattle. Seoul is playing the long game too. 9 days after the signing, Hanwha Ocean submitted a $20 to $24 billion bid to supply 8 KSS-3 submarines with co-production rights in Halifax. CBC reported the package promises 6,000 jobs and full combat software transfer. In exchange, Canada will license its hybrid patrol boat hull, clocked at a record 32 knots off Mokpo, to Korea Shipbuilding, allowing Seoul to produce a domestic version to protect newly discovered gas fields off Pohang. The hybrid vessel, rated a world first by Marine Jet Power, uses just 60% of the fuel of a traditional OPV. Beneath the numbers lies a larger geopolitical strike. The Rusi think tank warns that expanding the Five Eyes alliance is a red line for Washington, yet Carney has offered satellite optical data sharing with Seoul, positioning South Korea as an early special partner in battlefield signal fusion, once a U.S. monopoly. If the deal finalizes, flat-panel radars built in Seoul will feed raw data into the Ottawa-Wellington-London fusion vault, potentially bypassing Washington. In essence, America no longer holds the sole master key to Western intelligence. The signal to the White House is unmistakable: an Asian ally is ready to pivot if Washington abandons the field. Through 3 key moves, LNG, Arctic sensors, and KSS-3 submarines, Carney demonstrated Canada's ability to lead a new coalition without looking to the U.S. Capitol. The question now isn't whether Seoul will reshape the global order, but how soon other nations will align with it. It's a stark reality: if Washington continues to act like a guest at the power table, the leader's chair will soon be draped in flags that aren't American. In the 24 hours following the White House's freeze of over $60 billion in USAID funds, an order that forced 2,700 staff to clear desks, canceled 90% of aid contracts, and locked emergency relief dollars in the Treasury, Canada introduced a $544 million risk guarantee package for the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, and the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB. A statement from the Prime Minister's office noted that this single signature could unlock up to $1.6 billion in concessional loans for cash-strapped economies across the Western Hemisphere. In other words, Ottawa didn't spend a dime in cash but still opened the vault Washington had shut. Carney's guarantee-first approach breaks from the traditional aid model. Instead of direct cash transfers, often criticized as conditional, Canada commits to covering 25% of the risk if a project fails, enabling development banks to offer low-rate loans for targeted projects like a 110-megawatt wind farm in St. Elizabeth, Jamaica, a sustainable cacao program for 3,000 farming households in Santander, Colombia, or a climate-indexed insurance package protecting 250,000 Honduran farmers from hurricane losses. IDB calculations show every $1 in guarantees attracts $3 in private investment through risk sharing. The CDB governor called the $544 million an economic vaccine for the post-Trump tariff era, where commercial borrowing costs have doubled in 2 years. The ripple effect hit the West's major financial players almost instantly. 3 days after the G7, the European Commission launched its Better Futures program, injecting €291 million in guarantees for the IFC to draw in over €1 billion in private capital for clean energy and smart agriculture, aligning with Canada's initiative. In Tokyo, JITSA announced a $1 billion co-investment fund with IDB Invest, using an originate-to-share strategy to accelerate capital flow and reduce risk. Japanese media labeled it Carney's lean clone. As the EU and Japan joined in, Sao Paulo analysts warned of a forming guarantee race, dismantling the old US aid-centric axis. Meanwhile, the fallout from the $60 billion USAID freeze worsened. Peru's CDC reported 12,000 malaria cases without timely drugs, and the WHO noted an 18% cancellation of Bolivia's polio vaccine shipments due to cold chain failures as USAID logistics stalled. A leaked USAID memo, revealed through a federal court filing, admitted the rising fatality risk could reach humanitarian disaster levels if the freeze persists beyond 12 months. In this grim context, Carney turned a guarantee document into a soft power weapon. It adds no new taxes for Canadians yet secures significant leverage at trade and minerals negotiations. Latin American governments responded swiftly. Colombia's finance ministry hailed the guarantee as a safety runway, enabling cacao farmers to borrow at 3% instead of 9% commercial rates. Jamaica's energy ministry pledged the St. Elizabeth wind project will boost renewables to 35% by 2028, surpassing Paris targets by 3 years. Honduras's president announced negotiations to extend climate risk insurance to rice, ensuring the nation no longer relies on U.S. aid each hurricane season. These aren't just gestures, they signal a new aid order where Canadian tax dollars, still in the vault, carry more weight than billions frozen in Washington. The message to the White House is clear: if America uses tariffs and aid cuts as leverage, Ottawa is ready to wield ledgers and guarantees as power tools. When $544 million in commitments can overshadow decades of USAID influence, the question isn't how many allies Trump loses, but how many nations will seek Canada's guarantee stamp in the next round of talks. 3 months ago, China controlled 70 to 95% of global nickel, cobalt, and lithium refining, per the latest IEA report. But post-Alberta, a Canada-led strategic minerals alliance is rewiring the battery value chain, pushing Beijing out. It begins in British Columbia's snowy forests, where the Baptiste project is set to mine 60,000 tons of clean nickel annually, 34% of Canada's current output. With low-sulfur aurorite ore, the site cuts emissions by 95% compared to typical laterite mines, making Canadian nickel a green asset for battery makers aiming to reduce carbon footprints. The signed deal sends all raw ore to Germany, specifically BASF's new 15,000 ton per year black mass recycling plant in Schwarzheide, where metals are extracted, refined, and transformed into cathode precursors. From there, the material moves to Incheon, feeding LG Energy Solution, Samsung SDI, and SK On, 3 companies holding nearly half the non-China EV battery market. When vehicles reach end of life, cells return to Japan, where Panasonic and Sumitomo Metal Mining operate a closed-loop facility, recovering nickel and cobalt to 99.9% purity for the next cycle. For links, Canada, Germany, South Korea, Japan, form a clean, China-free circle. For markets, the message is clear: whoever controls rare earths and secures the skies steers the EV and military drone supply chains. Ottawa's next move isn't just a mine, it's a shield. In late May, Prime Minister Mark Carney confirmed negotiations for Canada to join Golden Dome, the North American adaptation of Israel's Iron Dome, a $175 billion program Washington aims to activate by 2029. An ANSYS analysis suggests deploying sensors, interceptors, and AI control to the 70th parallel would cover 19 million square kilometers of Arctic territory, closing the missile gap exploited by Russia and China. Carney dubbed it an Ever-Ice Dome, pledging Canada's $6 billion low-altitude radar network, built with Australia, in exchange for co-control of orbital sensors, previously a U.S. monopoly via NORAD. Washington responded quickly, with President Trump imposing a $61 billion fee for the dome unless Canada relinquishes sovereignty, offering it free only if Ottawa becomes the 51st state. A leaked Defense Ministry report revealed that integrating Israel's Iron Dome into the Arctic sensor grid would cost just $4.3 billion, under 3% of Trump's price, while keeping Canada in control. With clean nickel feeding Korean batteries and an Arctic sky under an Iron Dome, Canada isn't just selling minerals, it's securing the Western supply chain. The EU promptly allocated €291 million in Better Futures guarantees to replicate Ottawa's de-risk model for mineral investment. Japan launched a $1 billion fund with IDB Invest to secure cobalt in South America, beyond Beijing's reach. As a result, cobalt prices on WOXI rose 10% after Congo extended its export ban, yet Korean and Japanese battery makers remained unfazed, having secured Canada's non-China route. From minerals to missile defense, Carney is weaving economics and security into a network where Washington no longer holds the center. If the Arctic Iron Dome activates as the first nickel-cobalt bars roll off Incheon's lines, the world will see a pivot. Beijing loses its mineral dominance, Moscow faces a northern radar barrier, and the White House must decide whether to keep pushing its Western Rim ally into the G7's leadership role. Trump's empty chair in Alberta didn't just spark headlines, it set off a chain reaction that sidelined the United States on the G7 stage. First, hours after his exit and the 50% steel and aluminum tariff, Seoul signed a draft defense deal with Ottawa, offering a KSS-3 submarine package worth up to $24 billion and a self-propelled artillery transfer for Canada's army, a move Canadian media called a direct bypass of the Pentagon. Second, while Washington froze $60 billion in USAID, Carney launched the $544 million risk guarantee for the Inter-American and Caribbean Development Banks, unlocking up to $1.6 billion in loans for wind power in Jamaica, sustainable cacao in Colombia, and climate insurance in Honduras. In one afternoon, Canada turned paper into cash, with regional leaders calling it the economic vaccine for the post-Trump tariff era. Third, Carney unveiled a strategic minerals alliance, channeling clean nickel from British Columbia, refining it in Germany, processing it in Incheon, and recycling it in Japan, a value chain sealed without China. The G7's Fresh Minerals Action Draft also outlined supply defenses against Beijing's rare earth squeeze. The impact was immediate. Berlin, reeling from a 23% battery output drop, opened a direct line to Ottawa. Chancellor Scholz stated he wants BASF's cathode hub tied to Canada's nickel-cobalt supply in a call with Carney a week after the summit. Tokyo proposed AI and quantum data sharing via a new G7 task force, celebrating the rushed signing of a military information pact enabling supercomputer algorithms to model Arctic climate and guide submarines. Carney seized the moment, declaring, "Those clinging to nostalgia will be left behind." The statement critiqued the White House's protectionism while affirming a multipolar order emerging within the G7. Canada holds the guarantee wallet, South Korea offers defense tech, Germany seeks green batteries, and Japan embraces AI and quantum data. The US chair remains, but the power game has shifted in days. In a single 24-hour cycle, Canada transformed from the quiet player at the table's edge into the architect of the G7 security and finance fronts. From the Arctic-Pacific Defense Pact with Seoul to the $544 million Latin America guarantee to the Strategic Minerals Alliance securing a clean battery chain, Ottawa proved influence lies not in troop numbers but in connecting the power pieces Washington left scattered. If the White House continues building tariff walls and removing itself from negotiation lists, the G7 could fracture into alliances orbiting Canada, South Korea, and a green-focused Europe. At that point, Washington won't be the director but a guest star, an empty chair with a nameplate collecting dust. So, how much time does the US have to reclaim its role, or has the Canada Plus era already begun? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss our next episode, where we'll explore whether the EU is ready to align with Carney's vision.